era of constant change, the most powerful innovation in education is not technology, it is leadership. To explore the ideas and perspectives driving this transformation, ETEducation presents How Education Leaders Think, a series that delves into the philosophies, experiences, and decisions shaping the future of education. In this episode, we step into S.P. Jain Institute of Management and Research, SPJIMR, a top-tier Indian business school. We look at how their unique blend of academic excellence, innovation, and societal impact is actively nurturing tomorrow's responsible and future-ready leaders.
Hello and a very warm welcome to How Education Leaders Think. I'm your host Devina Lasson. Now today we are here at an iconic business school, a place where leadership is shaped by purpose, where innovation meets true empathy, and where the future is built with intent. This is SPJIMR, and we are deep in conversation today with Dean Varun Nagraj, leading faculty members and students to explore how leaders are truly made. Take a look. Dr. Nagraj, it's such a pleasure to sit here and talk with you today. Thank you for being with us on How Education Leaders Think, and we're going to really deep dive into your journey. So thank you. We're very excited about this.
Thanks, Devina. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for someone like yourself, of course, you've had such an illustrious career here in the education sector. Can you tell us a little bit about how, if you were to look back on your journey, what were some of those really defining moments that shaped you as the leader that you are today?
I wish I had those dramatic break points, where I was going along one direction and something happened and then I changed directions. But I think for a lot of us, these tend to be sort of a continuous evolutionary process. And so maybe what I can do is work backwards and say, what do I see a leader's role as?
Yes.
And then I think you might agree with me that, those things I'm going to talk about actually kind of gradually come to you through smaller experiences, nothing too dramatic. But maybe we should begin with sort of my view of what I think a good leader does. So probably two ways of looking at it. The first one, I'll get it out of the way, which is I think a leader's primary job is to make sure that he or she sets their team up for success. So I think a leader's primary role is to make sure that anybody who works for them can be the best version of themselves. Because if they can, then regardless of the problem that their team is facing collectively, the chances are that the team will be able to respond to that particular situation. So that's a very sort of simple way of looking at it. It's almost problem agnostic, just saying it doesn't matter what the problem is, what the context is. If you have a team that trusts you because you let them be the best version of themselves, things can work out. True. The second thing that you do, and again, this I think comes through experience, is once you know what is going on around you, so once you have made sense, if you will, you have to frame the problem in terms of something that you need to respond to. So the problem framing and the solution creation, how to respond, is sort of the second thing that I think a good leader does. And both of these, of course, the leader is relying not just on his or her own, instincts and capabilities, but on the team around them. And a team that wants you to succeed is going to help you be a better sense maker, is going to help you be a better problem framer and a solution creator. And the last part of a leadership journey is about getting things done. And I always ask my executive clients in particular, saying, why should somebody follow you? Can you list for me 5 reasons why your team members would want to follow you? And I think that ability to be able to articulate why it is that, your team wants you to succeed and will follow you. And that could be everything from providing clarity on where you want to go, sharing a value system with them, meaning wanting the same things, providing a safe environment for them to try and fail, if it so happens, always having their back, being able to coach them, being seen as credible that somebody wants to follow. There's a range of things that allow you as a leader to be a credible leader and to get things done. I'm sure, again, as I said, there might have been occasional, spikes in my journey, but I think, now sitting where I'm sitting, I think I'm hopefully better at these 3 things now than maybe I was 10 years ago, and definitely better than I was 20 years ago.
So yes, absolutely. Noted that, of course, as a leader, you have a long journey, and it's the entirety of the journey that shapes who you are. But for you, was there ever a moment or a string of moments where you realize that the concept of leadership perhaps is something different from what you might have thought at the onset of your career?
I think that's a fair question to ask, because most people evolve from being, individual contributors and individual high performers to being sort of early managers or leaders, and then hopefully becoming high-performing leaders. So if I reflect upon my journey as an individual performer, the thing that used to give me the most amount of pleasure personally was a sense of accomplishment. I have only changed jobs when I felt that I wasn't accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish, that I wasn't being the best version of myself. Now, there may have been multiple reasons why I might not have been the best version of myself, but this notion of accomplishment and feeling a sense of accomplishment to me was an important thing. So I took that lesson into my leadership journey, saying if I feel that way, it is possible that others who eventually end up working for me or working with me want to feel that same sense of accomplishment. And as I told you, when I began our conversation, defining leadership as the ability to make sure that your teammates can be the best versions of themselves, I think that was probably a transition point that came from me being an individual contributor and reflecting on what made me happy, what made me productive, and saying it is likely that there are people like me out there who really want to have a sense of accomplishment. Then I think another jump that probably came was around sort of the importance of impact. So the question is, what kinds of problems are you working on? And that, I think, probably happens at different stages. And in my case, it probably happened as I was hitting my late 40s or 50s. And the question really was, we spend a lot of energy on what we do. We spend more time on it than anything else, honestly, in our lives. So not only should we feel a sense of accomplishment, it should really have some meaning or purpose as well. So I probably layered in the concept of meaning and purpose into my leadership journey a little bit later, right? And so there the question was, is what I'm doing meaningful, not just to me, but to people around me? So the idea of impact, the fact that you do something that hopefully leaves some lasting impact on a group of people or a community or an economy and so forth, I think became more important for me. Is something that struck me during the time of the social networking movement.
Right. Okay.
So starting from then, I started to become increasingly skeptical about the purpose of technology, trying to figure out, well, what really is the purpose of doing something? What is the impact possibly of social networking? And those questions for me continued to multiply as, social networking grew into whatever it has grown into. It continues to bother me as AI expands, as in what really is the impact of AI over time. And those are two examples. But overall, that movement from accomplishment, to the fact that you're to let people be accomplished, to the fact that you yourself should have a sense of meaning and purpose might be those few breakpoints along the way that you're asking about.
Okay, wonderful. Wow, so much to deep dive in here. As you've mentioned the impact, of course, of AI and tech and innovation, let's unpack that a little bit. Of course, as a very prominent education leader today, how do you see AI changing the education landscape? I mean, some may say that, of course, this is an enabler for all kinds of, let's say, personalization, customization. Of course, is very much the nature of the Gen Z target audience that we have today to take to such technology. But for someone like yourself, you've been in the space of education for a long time. How do you see the impact of AI here in education space? Is it something that you're embracing, something to be a bit skeptical of? Love to hear it.
From an educational perspective, the fact is you can't fight this particular trend. So now putting on my view as an educator, and I speak for all educators, when AI began to rear its head in our classrooms several years ago, our instinct was to try and curtail its use in some manner because we felt it got in the way of learning. We felt that it provided for shortcuts. And therefore, we all went around looking for policies around plagiarism and AI overuse and so on and so forth. But like, viruses and antiviruses, spy versus spy, this is an evolving game. And I think we all came to the conclusion as educators that this was not a game we could win, right? AI becomes integral to what people do. So we've got to essentially adapt to it. So I'd say, speaking for all educators, we've all embraced the fact that AI is something we should figure out, and figure out how to actually make the educational experience better. So from a learner's point of view, from a teacher's point of view, there might be some differences. So From a learner perspective, the concern I have is that AI actually short circuits the learning process. Learning comes when you actually grapple with a particular situation for a while, you reflect on it for a while, you try a few things that fail, and then knowledge emerges, then expertise emerges. If everything happens, right in your mind the first time around, you would never actually put in the hard yards, to become a good learner.
Yeah.
This would be like somebody wanting to be a great cricket player and doing a video simulation in which, you can prove that you're a great player, but you know that the real field is different. So I'm worried that students' learning is getting short-circuited, but yet it's a fact that they're using AI. So how do we as educators creatively incorporate AI to increase their learning? How do we insist on the fact that curiosity and critical thinking, which are the two things under threat from AI, don't completely disappear? So we've had to reshape how we do our classes.
So most of the education sector is trying to play catch up with how do I get it, handle AI. And just with any change, man's or woman's or our fundamental response is to resist first, protect what we have, which I think a lot of colleges initially started. So you've got lots of tools to monitor AI-led plagiarism, prevent AI usage, and people have slowly come to a realization that it's on a losing battle. It's here to stay, right? So the question then is, how do you embrace it? So I love AI, right? I tell all my students, we are running electives. By all means, please use it. But the trick is, how do you develop thinking capacity in students? Like, to give you an example, if I walk into an interview anymore, if I have to take a lecture, traditionally you need a case study to be developed, right? And it takes months to develop a case study. Now I can develop a caselet in a matter of few hours. So the thinking order starts changing. So the whole emphasis to students is use AI to improve your critical thinking capacity, critically questioning your own assumptions and what is being thrown up from the system as well.
For example, if you give students a take-home, there is no guarantee that they're actually putting in the effort required to reflect on it and so forth. The submission comes in looking perfect, may have taken 10 minutes of time. The student learned nothing, right? So this basically means that maybe the whole idea of a take-home doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It might mean you actually have to work in person, in the classroom, in group projects, laptops down, talking to each other, building the social skills that the current generation struggles with a little bit, in order to sort of be problem solvers minus the technology. So in my class, for example, I tell the students to go home and use AI to improve whatever they worked on in class. On the other hand, there are those who are slow readers. You can create podcast versions of what you're teaching. You can create customized cases that illustrate very specific points. These things were very hard to do before. They're quite easy to do now. You can create course notes that are specific to what you want to get across much more easily when you co-author, let's say with Gemini on Canvas. Yeah. You can write out your class notes much more easily and to a point. So there are lots of wonderful things about it, but I think we have to figure out how to actually package this and deliver it in a way that from a student point of view, learning doesn't get compromised.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like this is a deeply value-centric approach, right? And I mean, JIMR is known for your values, such a, iconic institution here in India. How would you say ultimately, whether it comes to your personal value system as a leader, the value system of the institution, how is that seen in practicality in the way you teach your students, the way you embrace technology, and ultimately the way you are shaping the future leaders? So how do these values come through?
So hopefully two things have come out, right? And these are values I share with my parent institution, and that's the reason I'm here. The first one, is really around societal impact. SPJMR as a business school was set up around the fact that managers should influence and positively shape society, not just businesses.
Yes.
Now, that was a very counterintuitive, almost a revolutionary viewpoint back in the 80s. And the school built a whole bunch of processes and cultural substrate, if you will, to support the fact that, societal impact should come first and other kinds of impact follow. Sure. And hopefully, as I shared my journey with you, from a leadership point of view, going from a sense of accomplishment to going to an enabler to basically saying, where is the impact? I hope you see some parallels there, right? I do believe it is important for leaders and not to wait till they're 50 years old like I did, right? But perhaps even earlier in their careers to realize that impact and making a difference is what really should matter in your life. So I think that part of societal impact is a core SPJMR value that I share. And I think we have an opportunity to accelerate the inculcation of that value. And we've done so many things right. And we continue to basically build on those things. The second thing, though, that I've added, hopefully, to the mix is the fact that innovation is important. Societal impact in this day and age can only happen if you're bold enough and creative enough to try new things. Just doing the same old things, will probably maintain status quo. And if societal impact is about changing status quo requires innovative new approaches to doing it.
Absolutely.
And today's world allows so many different ways of being innovative. And I think my background maybe propels me more in that particular direction, as in how can we be innovative.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about your Makers Lab as well, now that we're on the topic of innovation and all the exciting ways in which you're training the minds ultimately of your students?
So, all business schools have provided their students with summer internships, right? So that part is there because we all recognize that for a student to learn, they need to have various experiences, where they can safely practice new things. So these, let's call these immersive experiences. And we've always had, I think, a plethora of immersive experiences that other business schools have slowly added. For example, rural immersion to understand Bharat, not just India. The ability to understand sort of the lives of the less fortunate in your own neighborhood and to do something about it, right? These are immersive experiences that our students have always taken away from SPJMR, saying these are some of the things that have made them a better person and probably accelerated that timeline to impact, if you will, that took me too long to get to. But immersive experiences have to go beyond that, and other people have caught up with it. So we've added a whole bunch of immersive experiences. For example, with our ETEch, which is our center that basically works with a bunch of startups and helps accelerate them. We do it not just because, we want to assist the environment, the ecosystem of startups, which we do, of course, but because doing so, we do it in a manner that actually benefits all our students.
Yes.
Having the ability to basically touch, these startups, learn from them, provide value, and so forth. And then building stuff. Part of an immersive experience is being a maker.
Yes.
How does one go about becoming a maker? This was something that bothered me over the last couple of years, because in an MBA curriculum, much as we might provide a design thinking lab, which we do, the time that the students have to actually come in and, hack things, build things, and so forth is very limited.
Yep.
So to get something done, it has to sort of become a course, And so what we did this year was to say, let's basically create something called a Maker Lab and insist that students make things. So, we basically put together a 3-month curriculum where we provided a very quick intro to a whole bunch of AI tools, also recognizing that a lot of students are, quite good themselves. They don't necessarily need faculty to teach them. But we gave them a space and a set of problem statements to work on. Some of these problem statements came from problems we face in our community. So we gave them practical problems they could relate to. They could, of course, pick other problems. And 3 months later, we had sort of a Maker Lab fair where all the teams that participated in this Maker Lab, which again was about a third of our incoming class this year. Next year, it'll be 100% of our class. They showed what their prototypes were.
But in the last couple of years, primarily because of AI, a lot of prototyping has become something that they can do without very hardcore engineering skills. So the Makers Lab was primarily to bridge that gap, that you might not make production application, but if you have a good enough prototype, as the dean suggested when we pitched this thing, that while everybody else is making presentations, we will deliver prototypes.
So the idea is we are past the world of PowerPoints. Whatever you do has to actually work. And so that notion of an immersive experience, think like a maker, was something that we added this year that I'm pretty proud of. And I think these are some of the more innovation, entrepreneurship-oriented things that we have added on in order to drive the right kinds of outcomes. So societal impact stays as our end goal. The way to get there is through innovation. And today, one way to innovate is to use AI wisely. And that's kind of what the Maker Lab was trying to get our students to do.
Wonderful. So hearing all these very innovative ways in which you are guiding students and again, the leaders of the future, what would you say is the one transformation that you hope to see in your students as they move through your institution? And, we are living in these times, of course, there's a lot of Gen Zs now in the education space. They have their own set of challenges, their own set of expectations. So how are you marrying all of that? How do you see the Gen Z audience today, and what do you hope they will achieve and receive from the institution as they come here?
So I'll use a phrase that might draw a laugh from some of my SPJMR students. I think it is a transition from me to we, right? Now, of course, a lot of students interpret it as something else, right? But when we say from me to we, it is, you come in as a 23-year-old, 25-year-old, 27-year-old, fairly self-centered, right? You have a set of angst and anxiety, which we can get to as to what ails today's generation. And then the point is, as I said, if the journey is 10 years from now, you really should measure the worth of your life in terms of the impact you had on others, right? Let's say that's the goal, 10 years from now. How do you basically make that transition happen? How do you go beyond thinking of yourself to really trying to figure out what the world around you needs and what you can do to get it done? So the transformation, I hope, is the series of experiences, immersive experiences we give you that have you examine or re-examine your world, not from your own narrow Gen Z point of view, but from a larger collective societal point of view. And yet from a transformation point of view, give you the confidence and the experiences in the background to get there. And hopefully they give you the confidence and the tools and the agency to actually pursue and realize that particular perspective. That's the transformation that I hope, we can drive.
So the institute is actually helping us shape through the different courses that we go through, as well as a corporate summer internship that we are currently doing. So through that, we get an exposure in the real world of how things work.
Okay. And yes, what is that angst? What are the challenges that you're seeing today that perhaps didn't exist at all some generations ago, maybe even not that long ago?
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I think some of it is technology driven. Some of it might be bad parenting on my generation's part, So for example, you look at the obsession with results and the pressure that, at least the students we see put on themselves, right? Now, were there equal pressures when, I was in my 20s? I think there were. It's just that I think the coping mechanisms, that perhaps we had, the current generation doesn't have. The coping mechanisms are what are different. Now, why are the coping mechanisms different? One is, I think technology plays a role because technology allows you to hide, from the real problems, right? It allows you to immerse yourself and get lost in a slightly different world than what you have. And then again, I don't know if the parents have actually helped in this manner. At least, in my generation, I know a lot of parents have tried to make their children feel like winners all the time. I spent a lot of time in the States, and some of that is true here as well. Everybody wins, in the football leagues that my children used to play in. There would, of course, be a team that won that division, but the 7 other teams that lost the division would also get prizes because everybody wins, right? Now, that's positive thinking, but I think in doing so, parents have probably taken away the resilience that children used to have. You have to have failure in order for you to be stronger. If you're never allowed to fail because your parents are so busy protecting you from failure or convincing you you're a winner even if you haven't actually won, your resilience is going to be lower.
Oh.
So I think, honestly, it is the coping mechanisms of Gen Z that need attention. But, that time has passed. All we can do is take those lessons. And for the next generations to come, I hope we find a way, to make sure that the coping mechanisms are back.
Really, really insightful there. So, okay, if we have to now think about the leaders of tomorrow, right? The future leaders who you're building right here in organizations like yours, institutions like yours, what would you say kind of the ideal leader in the next decade should look like? What are some of those qualities, the values as we are talking about? And how are they different? Like, what are we getting wrong about leadership today?
See, I think leaders should care, right? They should care about impact. They should care about what they actually accomplish for a broader group. Now, there are leadership theories that emphasize it, so I'm not going to say we're getting leadership theory and teaching wrong, but I do agree we have a problem with bad leaders, right? So in terms of leadership theory and teaching, the idea of stakeholder management is essentially that. The idea that, you are responsible to more people than just your shareholders. On the other hand, so therefore you have leaders who I think are good stakeholder managers. Okay. So let's call them leaders who actually have a purpose, that are driving their organizations the right way. Sure. There are lots of leaders who might say, yeah, but I really need to keep my shareholders happy. And therefore, They're ethical, but their focus really is on delivering primarily economic benefit, right? Not necessarily malicious or anything like that. But in the process of delivering economic benefit, if you have to cut a few corners, you would, because that is the primary pull. So I don't think it's a matter of actually teaching right or wrong. I think we have known right or wrong all along. Somehow we have started sort of glorifying, I think, bad behavior and bad leadership. So that discrimination, that I think we as educators, you in the media, really need to do is to, maybe shine more attention on other metrics of success and leadership other than purely how many zeros there are, in your own personal balance sheet.
Leader of the future is someone who doesn't jump into solution, stays in the moment, understands the problem, and then identifies what can be done to improve a certain thing rather than jumping onto some solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Really very thought-provoking insights here. And it's quite hard to wrap such conversations. But before we do that, Varun, would you be open to a few quick rapid-fire questions? So we'll just get a quick one word or
I'm
one
terrible with these one-word answers, but I'll do my best.
Okay, let's see how it goes. I mean, this will really put a nice, I think, a wrap to our session today. Okay, one word that you would take to describe SPJIMR?
Purposeful.
Yes. Okay, nice. A leadership trait that you value the most?
Support.
One habit that has shaped your career?
Hard work.
Nice. A book or an idea that has influenced your thinking?
Here there are several,
Okay.
so this would be a hard one.
Okay.
But I would actually say things from Malcolm Gladwell, actually influenced me a lot. Because what they did was they showed that, dry, boring academic scholarship could actually be interpreted in the real world and applied in the real world. So in a strange way, I would actually give Malcolm Gladwell credit for getting me interested in academia again and going back to do a PhD at a fairly advanced stage in my life.
Wonderful. One skill that every student must build today?
Accountability. Yeah.
One thing that you would change about education today?
I would get rid of evaluations, exams, and grading. I know it's somewhat of a utopian view. I think people should learn because they want to learn, because it's fun to learn, it's exciting to learn, and so forth. That could be just me. Okay. I think grades get in the way, but that's the best tool we have today.
Well, I'm sure you'll have a lot of people agree with you listening to this session. All right, wonderful. And if you wish, in more than just a line, but one piece of advice that you'd like to give to any students out there who are either going to enter into institutions such as yours, perhaps going through the process and dealing with all the challenges that we've discussed today?
I'd say don't worry about getting it right the first time. A wise man once said, baggage is only heavy if you choose to carry the bag, right? And so I think in this particular case, while you may have pressures on you, I think the right way to look at it is to don't get it right the first time. It's okay.
Yeah.
I had a second-year MBA student who's trying to get his desperate startup idea going. And I said, what is the rush? If you get it right 5 years from now, it's perfectly fine. I know when you're 25, 30 looks like you're old. I said, but when you get to my age, then, you sort of say 5 years meant nothing really, right? So I think essentially saying, take your time. There is no rush. Time is on your side. I think maybe that is what I would say.
Wonderful.
Time is on your side.
Wonderful. And, as we wrap our session, if someone were to really enter into the mind of an education leader such as yourself, what is the one main thing that they would see and they would understand about how leaders think?
In the case of education leaders, I think it would really be about what we might call force multipliers. Education leaders, I think, choose to be in education because it presents a unique opportunity to, if, you have the right goals in mind, to actually amplify, your impact. Because you're actually working with a large number of people who hopefully some of them, if they took some of what you feel to heart, you shared certain values, and then they went and executed on things that you were unable to. What a wonderful way to leave a legacy behind.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Varun. It's been such a pleasure, truly inspiring to sit here with you today, understand how you run this wonderful, again, very iconic institution and what it takes to really shape the future of the leaders of tomorrow. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks again.
All right, at the beginning of this day, we said that this isn't just a business school. And after spending time here, we can see what that really means. Because ultimately, leadership isn't just about what you achieve. It's about how you think, how you choose, and who you become along the way. Thank you for joining us here on this episode of How Education Leaders Think, and do stay tuned to ETEducation for many more insightful journeys.